Chancellor Zimpher, can you comment on balancing the need to maintain competitive salary levels to retain valued faculty and administrators with reducing overall costs to keep college affordable for students?
Right. Well, I think there's pretty good evidence that CUNY is affordable. It has among the lowest tuitions in the country, has the lowest debt rate that I have heard of for graduates. I guess the Empire Center produced a report that just based on the state payroll that indicated that 3 out of 50 of the top highest paid public employees in the state of New York were from CUNY, 3 out of 50. Interestingly, if you went across the country, and I think, Senator, you know this well, if you went across the country to every other state, the most highly paid public employees would be university employees. I happen to look at California, Illinois, Florida, Texas, and that is the case with the top 50 there. The only difference that I can see in New York is that in each of those other states, the highest paid employee is a coach. That's not the case in New York State. But so it's a competitive market, a national and in some cases international market for the most talented faculty, and in many cases, the most talented administrative leadership, whether it's at our colleges as presidents or other senior leaders or throughout the university. We compete in that market, and in my view, leadership matters. And the investment that we make there, I hope it is always wise. I will do everything I can to make sure that it is, but I think it's worthwhile. If you look at our costs compare it across the country to other similarly large university systems, this was a discussion that you had earlier with the SUNY representative, so I will follow up on that. You can compare in lots of different ways, and you can use lots of data sources. One that's used frequently is based on IPEDS data, which is, as you know, self-reported from institutions. So at CUNY, it's reported by 24 colleges, and then it's reported by CUNY Central. And there are a lot of things in that data that if we had better control over it wouldn't be included, and they tend to skew the results. So I suggest we look at something like independently audited financial statements of universities, whether it's CUNY and others, and look at a commonly defined institutional overhead that is used the same way every place. CUNY compares quite favorably in terms of its administrative costs.
Assemblymember Glick asked you a great question in terms of the capital dollars, $500 million. Is that critical maintenance or critical maintenance plus new endeavors?
It's plus. It's the combination. The critical maintenance in the executive budget, $103 million, as I mentioned. I think our ask for senior colleges was $284 million. There are some large projects and some small ones across CUNY, and critical maintenance is at the top of the list. But those are also some of the new facilities, some that are underway, where design is underway, or planning, or even in one case, construction, where we still need funding to be able to complete it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Assemblywoman Malliotakis.
Thank you, Chancellor, for being here. I just wanted to ask you the same questions that I've asked the SUNY Chancellor earlier, and that is, what is your opinion on, or do you think it should be a priority, rather, of the state to restore the tuition assistance program for graduate students that was eliminated back in 2010 when there was a $13 billion deficit? Since then, I have not seen it being proposed in any of the governor's budgets. I think it should be a priority, and I was wondering what your opinion is as the Chancellor of CUNY.
So yes, I'm in favor of more support for students, number one. But if I had to prioritize where that support would come, graduate TAP would not be at the top of my list. As I mentioned before, only 8% of, CUNY represents only 8% of the graduate TAP funds expended before, because many of our students didn't qualify for it. At the top of our list, I would put extending the number of semesters for which TAP is available. Right now, less than Pell. and students tend to burn through their TAP funds. So that would be high on my list. Another item high on my list, which is not a direct, but I believe it's an important indirect support of students, is the problem I mentioned before, the $50 million cost that we are incurring because TAP does not cover the full cost of tuition. That would be money we could invest in services, programs to support students.
So perhaps increasing the awards for TAP, so that way the CUNY system wouldn't have to absorb that credit you mentioned earlier would be a priority?
Right, that would be, that's high on my list.
Okay. And what about expanding the income eligibility threshold so more of the middle-class families can qualify? Because right now, well, it hasn't been increased since the year 2000. That's 16 years ago. I mean, it really, I think, should be modernized, that schedule. And right now, the cap is at $80,000 household income, which when you take the other costs of living in the state of New York that are continuing to rise, you know, I think that perhaps we should be modernizing that number. My proposal would be 100,000, but you know, if you're a family of four children to put through college, you can't do so on $80,000 household income, in addition to a mortgage and other expenses. So I just want to know what your opinion would be, and if we would see more CUNY students be eligible if that threshold was increased.
You know, I'd have to look at the data to see where that would fall on my list of priorities, but I think it's worth looking at. It hasn't been changed in 16 years. But I think the first two that I mentioned, increasing the level to pay the full cost of tuition, and then expanding the number of semesters of TAP availability would still be first and second on my list.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing your opinion.
Thank you.
Senator Stavisky.
Thank you, Chancellor. I think I heard you say in response to the question about whether the $240 million would be sufficient to cover the collective bargaining requirements. You said that would be sufficient.
You could check the record, of course, but I don't think that's what I said.
That's why I'm asking the question.
I think I said it would certainly be
it would be helpful.
Yeah.
But that $240 million is contingent upon the city assuming the 30% cost of the cost of the college, of CUNY, which initially, obviously, the state took over during the fiscal crises earlier than 10, 12 years ago, originally. Would the current downturn in the economy, we see the stock market not being as vigorous as we would perhaps like, how is any economic difficulty going to affect this entire program? Is this going to present additional problems in terms of providing the services that we want to see?
Well, any reduction in CUNY's budget would certainly affect programs that we offer today. And in fact, as I hope I have argued, and even more so hope it's convincing, that an additional investment in CUNY is necessary to provide the kinds of services that our students need, who often face greater challenges than the population of college students at large succeed. And so we need to do more things like ASAP. We need to do more things like effective remediation programs like CUNY Start and Summer Start. We need to hire many, many more academic advisors, which is, by the way, one of the, I think, most important elements of success of ASAP is the fact that those students, there are far fewer students per advisor in that program. So we need to make more investments to do that kind of thing, I think. Certainly not less.
And I'm delighted that you spoke about ASAP, and because I've asked that question to your predecessors, and I'm absolutely convinced it's something that needs to be replicated, not eliminated. Two quick questions. You mentioned nearly 1,000 new faculty. Are they full-time or or adjuncts?
Full-time.
Full-time. And lastly, the critical maintenance issue. I represent two of your facilities, Queens College and Queensborough. They're both in my Senate district, but I'm very familiar with the entire CUNY, all of the CUNY campuses, and many of them are crumbling because they were built so many years ago, and critical maintenance is not sufficient to put them into the position where students are going to be safe in these buildings. So how do you see the capital money, how essential is, or how critical is the capital money versus the critical maintenance? Because critical maintenance obviously cannot be used for new construction.
Yeah, this would be a very difficult choice to make on choosing one above the other. I think the critical maintenance money gets a little bit of an edge because these are facilities that we already own, that we need to make improvements in to keep them functioning. So that is absolutely essential. And as you know, that if you don't make progress on a backlog of deferred maintenance, it only gets worse.
Exactly.
And so we've been making progress, and I certainly hope that we can continue to. But for our students to be graduating in health professions and STEM disciplines and in other areas where some of the best opportunities are for them, they have to have the same kinds of facilities, the same kinds of lab space, the same kinds of tools that students at competing universities do. And this can't be done by retrofitting a 100-year-old building in many cases. And so the kinds of buildings that we've been building are often science and technology buildings. And that has to be new construction. If I could follow up quickly on two things. One, the full-time faculty. These 996 were full-time. And that's a hugely important investment. But if you look over time at the ratio of full-time and adjunct faculty, we're still way below where we were earlier in terms of, A, the absolute number of full-time faculty, but certainly the percentage of full-time faculty to the total professoriate. So 996 is a good start, but we need to continue doing that, especially when, as I mentioned earlier, we added 55,000 students over the last decade to CUNY. The second thing I would say is that since you mentioned one of the campuses you represent, that I neglected to mention that my colleague, President Felix Matos Rodriguez, is here in case there's a special question for Queens College, but he's here to support me because he knows I need it.
Having gone to graduate school there, I appreciate Queens College. Last question, of the 996 new faculty, presumably none of them have a contract.
No.
Do they have a contract? Has it been difficult, let me rephrase the question, has it been difficult to recruit faculty because of the collective bargaining issues that have not been resolved in the last 5 or 6 years?
So I'm not directly involved in recruiting faculty. I've hired 6 presidents. I'm going to hire 4 more this year. Both CUNY's budget situation and particularly some of the issues that I discussed with Chair Glick and Chair Laval earlier are certainly, they are extremely important issues in any discussion. And I would say that equally important is our failure to reach an agreement with our faculty, and certainly something that the people that I'm recruiting are concerned about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. Lubinacci.
Good afternoon, Chancellor.
Hi.
I know we mentioned about the 1,000 new full-time faculty. Could you just give us a little overview in terms of what were the major areas the CUNY hired in the past several years?
You mean the disciplines for the 1,000?
Yes.
I can't.
Okay.
I'd be happy to get it to you, but I
Okay.
can't tell you what it is today.
And I guess this was just leading into some programs, if you guys see in your upcoming budget, and what or how successful some of the remedial programs have been. I don't know if you could just speak a little bit about that, because I just wanted to see if some of the 1,000 that were hired went to remediation, whether it was in, mathematics or writing, and, just to see how successful the programs have been in that.
Yeah, again, I'll have to get you the information on where they went, because I can't comment. I don't know if any of my colleagues behind me have that handy, but I'd be happy to get that to you. We have continued to make investments in the programs that address remediation. We are doubling the number of students who participate in CUNY START, which is a specific program which costs $75, but in most cases we remit that cost, so it costs the students very little to try to get their remedial needs out of the way. I can tell you that 408 of those are at community colleges, but I still can't tell you what disciplines. So that's an area where we've been making additional investments. Chancellor Zimfer mentioned earlier different strategies on trying to overcome what is the most significant challenge that we have with the developmental needs, and that's in mathematics. And we are similarly experimenting, piloting the programs from the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching in quantways and statways to try to find other ways to help our students get the math that they will need in their degree program and to be successful later, but that have higher success rates.
And just in terms of, I know you've seen a significant increase, about 5%, or about, you said 13,000 students in terms of the past several years, in terms of an increase. Do you think the students are better prepared coming into CUNY, or less prepared, or the same as they've been the past few years?
Over the last few years, I would probably say we haven't seen much difference. If you look at the percentage of students who present with remedial education needs, the percentage has not changed that much. So given that we've grown, the absolute number probably gone up, but the percentage seems to be about the same. It's about 80% at our community colleges.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Senator Diane Savino.
Thank you, Senator Young. Good afternoon, Chancellor.
Good
So
afternoon.
I just want to, not to belabor the point, I want to go back to the outstanding contracts, just so I understand. In your testimony, you said that they've been working without a contract for more than 5 years, and thus far, you have been able, or the university has been unable to reach an agreement. Can you shed some light on why? What is getting in the way of settling these contracts?
I'm not sure how much I can go into this in this setting.
Without revealing trade secrets, of course.
I'm sorry?
But, without revealing trade secrets, of course.
Yeah.
Well, what seems, is it there's not enough money to settle it? I'm assuming soon the CUNY unions are likely going to achieve something with respect to the citywide pattern. You know, there's generally pattern bargaining kind of stretches across all the municipal unions, so I'm assuming that would be somewhere around that. So there's two questions I have. One, what seems to be getting in the way of settling a contract? And two, is the $240 million that's referenced in your testimony, would that be sufficient to cover the pattern that's already been established, or is that insufficient?
You know, my recollection is that the 240 represents a number that is very close to what would be, so I'm just going to lay this out, my understanding of this. It took a 4% increase in 2010 and moved it forward. The total commitment for the retroactive component would be about $240 million for the PSC.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't be for the total faculty or total staff.
Right, because you also have
CUNY.
DC 37.
So I think that's a pretty close approximation of that number.
But do you have a sense of what all of the outstanding contracts could potentially cost?
Well, again,
If we
you-
adhere to the pattern, the existing pattern that's been established by the
Well, which
other
pattern, the
municipal
state or
unions?
the city pattern?
City, assuming, if it was the city pattern.
I don't think we follow the city pattern, but, I mean, we have in the past followed, I am told, obviously, I've been here a little over a year, and we haven't had a contract in over 5
Somebody's
years.
coming.
But we have followed a sort of a combination between the city
Right.
and the state in the past. And this gentleman who has showed up to my left is the Vice Chancellor for Budget and Finance at CUNY.
So I guess I should ask him.
I'm not sure if he's going to further my goal of not completely answering your question, or whether he's going to answer it.
And by the way, if you don't know the answer, that's fine. I mean, it's just, you're trying to figure out, like, is the amount of money that you're claiming is sufficient, or even that the governor is proposing, or CUNY is proposing, is it sufficient to cover retroactivity of all of these bargaining units, assuming you have a ballpark figure that you think it is?
Yeah, during last year's legislative session, our Faculty, Student, and Professional Staff Congress had quoted a number of $240 million was needed for retroactive increases. But since then, now a whole year has gone by, so the retroactive increases are actually more because we have to cover another year. So following that pattern, and following that, that number that was put out there last year by Faculty Union, the retroactive costs for all of our unions would now be well over $300 million.
That's important for us to note. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not bring up my favorite subject with you, and that's, of course, the Murphy Institute. As you know, the governor's budget includes $500,000 for the maintenance of the Murphy Institute. The legislature put up $1.5 million last year. We're advocating to do the same thing this year. But I continue to push along with other members of the legislature. I know Assemblywoman Glick is a big supporter of this, making the Murphy Institute a separate school inside CUNY. You know, it's growing. It is the institution where working people are able to come later on in life, achieve a degree, elevate their education, improve their economic standards, and I really think it's something we need to continue this discussion to make it a freestanding school inside of CUNY, because every year they shouldn't have to come hat in hand to the legislature to demand money. We have to find a way to provide stable, secure funding for the Murphy Institute.
I thank you, Senator. I think our schools would tell you that their budgets are probably no more secure. I welcome the investment that the legislature has made, and thank you. As you know from our conversations, I support the work of the Murphy Institute. We're making additional investments and hires this year, and we will continue to support and look for ways for it to continue to do an even better job of what it does. So I welcome the investment, and I thank you for your support, and we'll consider to take that under
And hopefully
advisement.
post-budget, we can have that meeting of all the stakeholders to figure out what we can do to support the Murphy Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Glick.
I wanted to ask a follow-up. In the last budget, there was an inclusion of a STEM scholarship for the students who were in the top 10% of their high schools who wanted to pursue a STEM discipline. And I'm wondering whether CUNY has had a substantial increase, some interest. Are people coming to you and saying, we had no idea? I'm just trying to gauge how effective that program is, whether it has driven more of the top 10% students to the city university or not.
Well, the timing last year made recruitment difficult for the following academic year. I'm told that we were able to get about 80 students last year in the scholarship, the STEM scholarship program, and an additional 30 this year, I think. So I think there's obviously room to grow as it becomes better known.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Krueger.
Hi. I know many of us have asked variations on the question, but I'll just try to be as direct as I can. CUNY has what percentage low-income students of color?
Well, I may have to unpack this a little bit. Our numbers show that it's about 38% of our students report households of less than $20,000. Students of color, I think there are about just less than 22% of white students at CUNY today. And I could give you a breakdown on
That's okay.
demographics, but.
So if the governor's proposal to cut $485 million out of your budget became real, then we would be taking 30% of the funding out of the higher education university that's serving disproportionately the lowest income, largest population students of color in the state. Would that be correct to say?
Well, I have not, let me just say, I've not heard a representation that $485 million would be a cut. The original proposal was a shift in the funding source. But just hypothetically, if you were to say a $485 million cut, it would be an existential threat to CUNY. That is such an enormous figure that it would represent many of our colleges. And you couldn't possibly, in any rational way, approach a reduction at that level. It would affect so many of our students. And so I don't think that has been proposed. And so I'm hesitant to even react to it, but hypothetically, yes, that would be it would have a huge impact
Well,
on
the
CUNY
state
and on the
hasn't
students we
proposed an
serve.
equivalent cut for the SUNY system, right? Only for CUNY. Correct?
The proposal to shift support from the state to the city is only, to my understanding, for CUNY.
Does the state have the power to tell the city of New York where it should increase its budget allocation to CUNY?
It's not the area of law I practice. I suspect there are people who could answer that question. I think there may be some disagreement about that.
Okay. My current reading is that the state doesn't have the power to tell the city of New York to shift $485 million of its budget money to CUNY. So I do interpret this as a proposed cut to CUNY. Let's say I'm right. What do you do on day one of the new budget year when you don't have that $485 million?
That is, I haven't laid out what the scenario would be yet, just because I can't imagine that that is a possibility. I can't imagine that. I don't think that was the proposal, and I can't imagine it's a possibility. It would represent an enormous reduction in the capacity of CUNY. As I said, you could, numerous colleges, depending on how you did this, would have to be closed, or you'd take a 30% decrease across the entire system, which would, I can't even imagine how devastating that kind of a reduction would be, and how many of our students it would affect adversely. So, but again, I don't think that was the proposal, and so I'm certainly not planning for that.
And you have 275,000 students in the CUNY system?
Do we have 275,000? Yes, we have 275,000 degree-seeking students this year, and about an equal number of adult and continuing ed students.
So I just did a little math. If you did have to take the $485 million cut over 275,000 students, you would have to potentially raise each of theirs tuition by $1,800 a year? You think they could do that?
I haven't done the math, so I'll have to take your word for it.
Can you imagine telling everybody it's $1,800 more per year?
No, I don't think with our student body that would be feasible, and it would have to start by you approving it.
And there's been back and forth around whether 240 million gets you how far toward your contract negotiations. Is it your understanding that this was resolved for SUNY with state money in previous years?
It is my understanding that in 2010, there was a 4% increase provided to SUNY faculty and staff supported by the state. Yes, that is my understanding.
There was a reference to that there was once upon a time that the city did pay more towards CUNY, and that was, I think my colleague misspoke, that was more like 40 years ago to 45 years ago now. Do you think there's a justification for the state government to have a different set of policies for students going to higher ed that live in 5 counties of New York versus the other 57 counties of New York?
You know, as I tried to make clear in my testimony, I don't think that this is an issue that I will get to resolve. And so I'm not sure that I'm going to weigh in with an opinion about the whether the state can have 2 sets of policies for CUNY and SUNY financing. They have 2 different makeups now. You were inquiring earlier about governance. SUNY has institutional boards for its community college boards, which the majority of the appointees are from local sponsors. CUNY has no such provisions. They have no local boards. The majority of the governance of CUNY is from the CUNY Board of Trustees, whether it's the community colleges or the senior colleges. The majority of those appointments are made by the governor, 10, and 5 by the mayor, with also an elected student voting student member and a non-voting faculty member. So there are significant differences already, as you know better than I. There are differences dating from '79 and earlier in the ways that the funding is distributed for CUNY. But I think the legislation is instructive, and I think on its face, the legislation recognizes the obligation of the state to support public higher education, whether it's upstate New York or whether it's in New York City. And of course, the state has done that for many years.
Thank you.